Welcome to What Not to Do, the podcast where we uncover the lessons that great leaders learn the hard way. I'm your host, Rutika, and today's discussion dives deep into the intersection of positive psychology, self acceptance, and sports psychology. Joining me is Benjamin Pelz from CuraMed Akutklinik, Allgäu, whose work intersects psychology, medicine, and innovation to transform patient care. I saw you had that smile, Benjamin. If you can please correct me on the name.
So if you pronounce it in German, it's CuraMed, Akutklinik Allgäu, and yeah, that's my workplace.
Okay. So getting that, Benjamin, thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome. Happy to be here.
Yes. So, Benjamin, can you start by sharing a bit about your work and philosophy at your company?
Okay, so I work as a clinical psychologist at the CuraMed Clinic Allgäu, but I also have further certificates in neuropsychology and in positive psychology, as you mentioned. So I did my bachelor in psychology, did my master in clinical psychology, and I currently do my PhD in general psychology with an emphasis on performance psychology. So a lot of blending of different types of psychology, obviously. And for my background, I studied in the US. So after I graduated high school in Germany, I got a athletic scholarship, played soccer in the US. So
Hmm.
sports psychology is very close to my heart as well.
Hmm.
So I'm a blend of different types of psychology, so to say.
That's great. That's great. We're going to come to sports psychology soon, but talking about positive psychology,
Yes,
I think it's often misunderstood or misapplied as well.
yes.
So, how does positive psychology influence both patient recovery and practitioners' well-being in your experience? And how do you balance encouragement and realism when leading clinical teams in high-pressure environments? This particularly for all the leaders that listen to us, this is something that we want to hear from you.
Yes, of course. So I apply positive psychology in the clinical setting, especially when it comes to gratitude. Um, I love gratitude. I love gratitude journaling. And with the misconception, it is not about like making everything positive. But
Hmm.
so for my patients, I always tell them I have a lot of patients who are deep in depression, and my saying to them is always, if you have a bad day, and obviously in a depressive phase, you have multiple bad days and you really feel down, but if you can just find one or two or maybe three things that you're grateful for that day, that doesn't make the day fully positive or whatever. But if your day is just like the little light points, this little light in your everyday, it makes such a
Hmm.
big difference if your day is 97% bad and you have this like little spots where you say, I'm grateful for that little interaction with whoever or whatever. That makes a huge difference if you have that and not think, okay, my day was just bad, 100% bad, nothing good happened to me today. And that's where I like to apply the positive psychology into this setting.
Oh, interesting. So that brings us to something, deeply personal,
Yeah.
yet professionally relevant, that is self-acceptance.
Yes.
So, in both therapy and leadership, it's often easier to preach than to practice, right?
Yes. Yes.
So,
Yes.
why do you believe self-acceptance is a cornerstone of psychological resistance for both patients and practitioners?
So in my workplace, I come together with a lot of high-performing individuals, and
Mhm.
there's always the same tweet kind of thing, and it probably applies to many of your listeners as well. So
Mhm.
they tie their self-worth to their performance, and that works well for the most part. But at some point, you can't get the recognition at work anymore because perhaps you're at such a high level that doesn't come as easy anymore as it used to be at the
Right,
beginning. And
right.
what I realized is that if you tie your self-worth on your performance, you
Mhm.
eventually will downfall at some point. And talking about self-acceptance, how I apply it to myself, how I try to apply it to my patients is you have an inherent self-worth as a human being, and you're totally okay how you are.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that you
Mhm.
have to be happy with who you are, whatever, but you have a self-worth, and your self-acceptance should be here. And
Right.
accept yourself. know that you're okay how you are, but obviously strive for whatever you want to accomplish, but always know that it's in the good and in the bad phases. Your performance is not determining your self-worth. That was a huge lesson I learned as an athlete. That's a lesson I learned as a psychologist every day for patients and myself. And I can only
Mhm.
give it to anybody listening, like in the good and the bad, always know you're okay how you are, who you are, how you are, whatever. But don't make the mistake and tie your self-worth only to your performance, because eventually you will end up talking to me in a psychological setting.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, speaking about accomplishments, speaking about growth, the landscape of psychological care itself is evolving faster than ever.
Yes.
So both with respect to, patient expectations as well and treatment models as well. So how do you see patient expectations and, the treatment delivery changing in today's healthcare environment? And as a psychologist navigating this change, what are some of the what not to do's lessons when guiding teams through transformation?
Okay, so I want to answer both. So obviously a lot of delivery changes with AI, with tele communication, everything. But going back to your first thing, it's the first question kind of thing. The mistake that I often see in patients is they're coming in and trying to get fixed and then go back to their environment, you know.
Right,
And
right.
and if you put it in medical terms, so if you jump down, like if you jump down from a tree and break your leg, nobody thinks that, okay, they get their leg treated and it heals eventually, and then they go back to the tree and jump down again, you know. And it's kind of the same with psychotherapy. So often when you talk to me, that is the beginning of a change that you eventually have to make. Most of my patients have issues both at the workplace and at the relationship side, the family side of things. So my goal is never to end relationships or whatever, and like obviously that's never the goal. But if you're honest with yourself and you think, okay, if I'm really, really honest, I'm not happy in my relationship for the last couple of years. I'm not happy at my workplace, and I've tried everything I can do, but it's not working. You know, you're not coming to me, and I fix you, and you can, you know, hold it or whatever. But psychotherapy, how I understand it, is tied to change eventually. So that's like the one mistake that I always see with patients. You know, you're not coming and I make some magic happen and you go back to your workplace and everything. You know, you perhaps have a boss that's bullying you and you go in there and everything is fine. That's not how it works. But so that's the one common mistake I
Right.
see in patients, like what they expect from me or from my colleagues. And talking about the delivery, obviously what we're doing right now wasn't possible like a couple of years ago. I think there's a
Mm,
huge potential. Also talking about AI and all the things that can be implemented in psychotherapy. I
mm,
had an amazing. So a couple of weeks ago, I was at the conference in Miami, and there are very few, like there are too few psychologists and psychotherapists in this world. So
mhm,
especially for elderly people, if you have the choice between talking to an AI that perhaps can help you, or talking to nobody, like I obviously prefer, you know, talk to somebody even if it's not a real person. And
mhm,
obviously, this personal contact is the best. But if
mm,
it's the choice between not talking to anybody and talking to a computer model, talk to the computer model. And I think there's so much great change happening.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
so yeah,
So, talking about this particular thing, you said that talking to a computer model or AI,
yeah.
do you believe that, in the near future, it's something unprecedented that we're discussing, in the near future, that emotional intelligence. See, now the AIs do not really have that kind of a EQ where, speaking directly to a psychologist does. So, do you think that that is something that is achievable, depending on how generative models are also integrating a lot of human touch into, their responses and everything. So, do you think that that's something where, you can see the future of psychology moving forward to?
Um, so I don't think psychologists will be replaced at all, but I think that they can be supported. Um,
Mm,
I think that it doesn't matter if you talk about documentation or if you talk about inpatient care. I think there's so much that AI can support us with. So,
Right,
for example, an AI doesn't have a bad day. I have a bad day sometimes, too few sleep,
right.
didn't have my coffee yet or whatever. And for
Mhm.
example, if we're monitoring the psychotherapy, so if an AI is listening, I mean, I know there's concerns with that too, but let's say
Mhm.
we get it right at some point and get what's happening with the data also right. I think if I miss cues, so if I talk to you and I miss cues from your end, like you say things and I overhear him, and the AI supports me and says you should listen to that, and like, what do you think about that? That can be such a huge support and eventually
Right,
betters the care for the patients. So I mean, I'm fairly young,
right,
so I support new stuff always. So
right, right.
that would be something that I think would be such a game changer if we have this starting.
Interesting. Interesting. Yes. So now let's pivot to something that's fascinating, the overlapping between sports psychology and leadership performance. So,
Yes.
what can mental health professionals and leaders learn from athletes about focus, pressure management, and maintaining motivation during the challenging periods? I've seen this one picture of yours, I think playing football, and coming from you have been an athlete and then a
Yeah.
practitioner. I would like to know what lessons have you taken from the days maybe you're still playing, but what sports gave
Absolutely.
you and you've implemented here.
So I think there's so much you can learn from sports, obviously. And
Mm-hmm.
if we talk about pressure, I mean, pressure is subjective. Pressure can be playing the Champions League final, or pressure can be facing your parent for the first time about that your childhood wasn't exactly as you would have wished for. So
Right.
I think sports psychology does such an amazing job with pressure and handling pressure and all the tools, talking about self-talk, talking about, grounding and stuff like that. And I never understood why we take those entities like clinical psychology and sports psychology so, as if there would be two different pairs of shoes. So talking about the overlap, and I think the most influential and the most potential has visualization. So I think athletes do an amazing job with visualizing things. And if we talk about leaders, if we talk about just regulars, just visualize what you're trying to do. So when we talk about this interview I'm doing right now, in my head, I went over it like at least 20 times this morning. And it
Mm-hmm.
makes me feel more prepared. And if we talk about that and just look at athletes, look how they do it, look at Tom Brady, how he did it. I mean, he's amazing at that. So I take him as an example. Um, Look at the athletes, how they visualize things and how they just feel prepared in the moment. And obviously it's something different if in my how I feel it, this is the first time right now we're talking about it, or in my head I already did it like 20 times. Obviously I'm much more
Right.
calm about it. So there
Right.
are many things you can do learning from athletes. I would say visualization is the most probably the best for everyday practice,
Mm-hmm.
and also for if we talk about leadership. If you have the board meeting, if you have whatever, visualize it.
Mm-hmm.
Visualize going in there, take everything, how do you feel, what do you want to say, and everything. How do you think people will react to it, and
Mm-hmm.
just go from there.
Right. So, like you spoke about leadership. So, I want to ask from your experience, is win at all costs, the concept of win at all costs, that's a mindset now. It's a very common across teams. So, do you think it's a biggest trap for leadership teams in the current times?
Um, Perhaps, and from my experience, you can't always win. I never won as an
Mm-hmm.
athlete. Like I won a lot of times, but I never always won. So
Mm-hmm.
if we take this to leadership, you can't always win. And if your goal
Right.
is all or nothing, and then you lose at some point, you maybe don't get the pitch or whatever, then your whole
Mm-hmm.
system falls down. And so winning at all costs, yeah, obviously try your best to win, but don't make it all or nothing because eventually you
Right.
will fail, eventually you will lose. And if your whole leadership style is okay, we never lose, and oh, now we lost, and what's now, then you lose credibility as well. So
Right.
do your best. I mean, I think Nick Saban, the college coach from Alabama, the best of all time, said it best. It's about the
Yeah,
process. And especially in failure, I don't see anything bad in failure. I think it's a lesson learned towards success, and
right,
so win at all cost. Like, and the more I talk about it, the more I think, that's a bad. I mean, I always want to win. I'm the ultimate competitor. Don't get me wrong about it. But if that's your mantra, what do you do if you eventually lose? Then you lose your credibility.
right,
So don't do
right.
it.
Yes, I think that's also one of the biggest lesson sports like teaches you because uh, either one has to lose, right?
Yes.
But everyone is striving for the spirit of winning. So
Yes.
either one is going to lose. So I think that's also where, you always have another opportunity to climb up there. So that's also something that I can relate from my sports days to this
Yes.
particular thing. So yeah. So we've
Yes.
covered some incredible insights so far, and now I want to, inward towards your personal experience. So
Yes.
the moments that taught you, what not to do. The entire point of our today's podcast is something that, we want to talk about. Not all the checkpoints, this is what you need to do, this is how you have to do, but, those things that not often get spoken about. So, can you share a personal or a professional challenge that taught you a very powerful leadership lesson?
Um, Actually, it goes back to what I already said at the beginning. Don't tie your self-worth to don't tie your self-worth to your performance, because
Mm-hmm.
eventually it won't work out. So if you're a parent, if you're just talking about yourself, if you're a leader, whatever, um, don't tie your self-worth to your performance. And talking about the positive psychology part of things, the gratitude, the gratefulness, the resilience that comes with it. Very few times in therapy, I was sitting there and listening to my patients, and I was like, I don't know how a person can deal with that. But there are very few stories where I was just sitting there and was like, I don't know how this person could handle it. And there was one common trait. So I had somebody who was fleeing his home country and had torture and everything you can imagine, like was traumatized to a level that is very, very hard to believe. I had a female patient who was abused by her father, who was abused by her husband, whose first sexual experience was um, non-consensual. And the one thing they all had in common was, even though there was so much bad things happening in their life, they were still grateful for many, many things. And I don't know, as I said, I don't know how they did it, but the one common trait I realized they had was gratitude towards the small things in life and towards the small experience they had. And
Mm-hmm.
gratitude is so, 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 so important and such a big tool and such a powerful tool. I mean, um, just what not to do. Don't tie yourself to self-worth and don't be winning at all cost. And just, if I can put in one thing you have to do, be grateful for the small things. And yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Benjamin, I also want you to give, one advice to the professionals who are navigating similar challenges in today's changing mental health landscape. So, to all the professionals, mental health professionals, what would
To
be
the
your
mental
advice?
to the mental health professionals, if your patients are angry, like, work with the anger. So many times I saw that my patients try to avoid being angry, try to swallow down their anger, and because most of them obviously had bad experience in their childhood with abuse or with violence or whatever, and so they tie anger with violence. And one thing I do with my patients is, get the anger out, find tools how to get the anger out of your system. And to all my
Mm,
mental health professionals, I've seen way too many colleagues who kind of not play into that, like talk to the patients and say, don't be angry or whatever. If I can give my patients one thing, don't swallow down your anger, work with it, use it, get it out of your system, and it makes the life so much easier and so much better because it's an emotion, and emotions want to be lived.
absolutely, absolutely. So, you've given a lot of insights to us, but I would also want you to give one message to our listeners, something they can carry forward to lead and live with greater purpose and self compassion.
And I think you said it, self-compassion. And in moments where you feel down upon yourself and where you feel like you're the worst person in the world, so to say, always try to look at yourself from a third person perspective. Like if I would meet Benjamin Pelz today, if I would meet you today, um, how would I look at myself? So, for example, if this interview wouldn't go so well, and I feel down about myself, then I could always, like, I would try to get back to my house and to my home, and in these moments where I'm like alone with myself, I'll be like, okay, maybe this didn't go so well, but so what, If this would be somebody else, you would be like, hey, head up, things can go wrong and everything. So apply the self-compassion you have towards everybody else to yourself, and
Um,
things
absolutely,
get a lot easier
absolutely.
from there.
That's something that's a really powerful statement. Benjamin, thank you for your thoughtful and heartful conversation. Your insights remind us that leadership, especially in healthcare, is isn't about perfection, but all about, continuous learning, care, the compassion that you have with yourself, humility. So thank you so much for all your insights. That's something that's my takeaway from today's conversation. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on What Not to Do. If today's discussion resonated with you, share it with someone who might need a reminder that growth often comes from our hardest lessons. Thank you. Thank you, Benjamin.
You're welcome.